Here, let's just start with the story. I like to call it our life resume of dieting and our struggles. My life resume of diet and struggles because that's why we're here. And so let's start there with your story, and then we'll dive in.
Oh God, how much time do you have? Like my story with dieting and weight goes back to my childhood. And like so many women, I think I look back at my pictures when I was, 13, 14, 15 years old, and I think, my God, I looked great, but I thought I was so fat and so unattractive even at that early age. And I was one of these smart little introverted kids, right? Like, I did good at school and I loved school and I had my little circle of friends, and that's all I needed. But inside, I was so harshly judging myself all of the time. Nothing that I ever did was ever good enough in my own eyes. And I think that's really when I started turning to food for escape. I didn't know it then, but my family, we were very much like the meat and potatoes kind of family, and my parents fed me well, but my mom went grocery shopping on the same day every week, and she always brought home donuts. And I would I would wait with bated breath for these donuts to come. And it's like I never made the connection between the donuts and my body image or my body at all. But what I knew is when I ate the donuts, nothing else existed. The thoughts I had about myself, the stress over school or anything else, none of that even existed when I ate the donuts. And so when I look back, I think like that's certainly when my emotional eating really started. But my real problems with weight didn't start till I was probably 13 or 14 years old, around there. I decided I was going to be vegetarian. And this was like, when would have this been? Like 80s, in the 80s. And I live in Alberta, Canada, which is very famous for its cattle ranching. And Alberta beef has this international reputation as being fantastic. And so, to put this into context, do you know Katie Lang?
Yes.
She's a Canadian artist, and so she came out, as gay around the time I decided I was vegetarian, and my province didn't care less about that, but at the same time, she also said she was vegetarian, and that was like the sin of all sins where I live, and so I was afraid, first of all, to say I didn't wanna eat meat, but I absolutely didn't want to, and I finally did, and my mom had no idea what to do with me, what to feed me. And because like meat and potatoes, that's all we did. And so I ate potatoes. Like this is what I ate. Or I would have like noodles with butter. And like I had a very carb-based diet, and my body came to need carbs all of the time. And so when I, finally grew up and left home, what I knew to cook for myself was like butter and noodles. And like this is all that I had. And I think I went to Weight Watchers for the first time in my first year of university, and I have gone at least 7 times since then. And it's just been constant since my early 20s of gaining weight, losing it on usually Weight Watchers, sometimes whatever other fad diet was going on, and then gaining it all back and then more, and then going back to Weight Watchers and gaining all back plus more, and on and on and on until, a few years ago, even longer than that, I would say in my residency training, I think I developed binge eating disorder. Like, nobody officially diagnosed me as that, but now knowing what I know and looking back, I definitely had that. And that's when my chaotic eating sort of happened, right? So I was doing 60, 80, 100-hour weeks in the hospital, often, 30 hours at a time on call shifts. And eating just became very chaotic. And so when I had chaotic eating and I was actually physically starving, on top of like totally stressed out and hating myself because I was like the only fat girl in the program, I really started binging and eating a lot. And that's when my issues with emotional eating, I think, really hit a peak. I was doing it all the time, like every day, multiple times a day, just doing whatever I could to escape, the stresses of residency training. Like, it was just the worst 5 years of my life. But when that finished and I emerged from my training, I decided, I have to do something about this. And I hired a dietitian and lied to her. Well, she never asked me, if I was binge eating or emotionally eating. She asked me to write down my meals. And so I wrote down for her my meals, but not anything that I was eating, in between
Yeah.
them. And she, for the life of her, couldn't figure out why I wasn't losing weight. And I was way too ashamed and embarrassed to tell her what was really going on. So felt like a total failure after that. And then I hired a coach. Ironically, not even for the eating, for stuff related to what I wanted to do in terms of my medical career. And for whatever reason, she held the space enough for me that I could tell her kind of what was happening. And just through working with her, not even a specialist in any of this, I healed the binge eating and I became very aware of how I was using food primarily to manage feelings of overwhelm and stress and anxiety. And so I spent a couple of years working through that. I don't do that anymore. I still struggle sometimes with the chaotic, eating, and I get myself in that cycle. And I think all of us as humans emotionally eat sometimes, but I don't consider it a problem for myself anymore.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's so true. I'm the same way. I am just even listening to these interviews on the summit and interviewing people, you just learn, you start to rewire your brain and you just start to figure things out and you have your tools, right? You know what to do
Mhm.
now and you have awareness. But there's, I had a huge friendship like breakup that was extremely abrupt and traumatic and like I went to my keto paleo donuts I had in the fridge. I was like, I'm gonna have a couple of these and then I'm gonna go to yoga and go walk. And I had my tools. And so I mean, I think that's the beauty of it is I'm still human, but I'm
Of
so
course.
much better. And we know our tools now. And instead of having wanting 50, we have one and then we go get our emotions. We start to like we know what to do now. And so
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing. I'm the same way. I love that you said chaotic eating because you should coin that term. That is so good because that is exactly what I resonate with so
Mhm.
much. So I would love to hear, take me back to like the movie of Dr. Michelle when you were going through those Weight Watcher periods where you really started to notice the binging. How many calories would they put you on? And then also I want to hear about how stressful your life was during your schooling, that 5 years. Like take us through a day of that, of like morning to night and just sort of I
Yeah.
just want get my feelers into that because we can all relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So in the Weight Watchers, I don't remember. It was all about points, right? And so you would get a certain number of points that you could eat, and then if you exercised, you would win more points that you could also eat. And each of the 7 times I did Weight Watchers, their points structure changed. So different foods are worth, different values. And I thankfully don't remember, a lot of that anymore. What I do remember doing is exactly the same thing that I did with the nutritionist is I would diligently write down everything I ate with my points until I needed a binge or until I emotionally eat it, and then I pretended it didn't happen and didn't write it down. So like
Hmm.
that was the same cycle for me over and over. And I'll give you like a day in the life of Michelle's residency, like a typical 30-hour on-call sort of thing. So you'd have to be at the hospital at about 5:30 in the morning to prepare for rounding. And I would usually not eat anything because I would sleep till the very last minute, get in my car to drive. I was usually super nervous and stressed out because you're training and patients' lives are put in your hands and you don't feel like you have enough experience. It's just terrifying. So I was often just too nervous to even eat initially. So then rounds would last several hours and they were tediously boring for me. Like there's a reason why I did emergency medicine and not anything else because I freaking hate rounding. And, eventually we would get a lunch break. We would absolutely get a lunch break. And we'd go to the hospital cafeteria. Don't know how familiar you are with these, but there is nothing healthy
Yep.
in in these things. And I would do my Weight Watchers thing. So I would look at foods and either like calculate what the points would be, or remember what the points would be, or somehow, do some calculation to see like what's going to do the least amount of damage for me, and usually feel so crappy that I would eat um the worst, possible choice. Or I would be eating with other residents, so feel like I would have to order like a tiny little salad or some things that I wouldn't look bad in the eyes of others. And then I would buy like a cookie or like a bag of chips or a snack and hide in the bathroom and munch them down where nobody could see me. So already by lunch, I'm in this cycle and feeling really shitty about it, right? And then afternoon, doing consults, seeing patients, usually getting yelled at by some attending, all sorts of things happening. And then by the time you're actually able to have another break, the cafeteria is closed. And all that you really have open to you is the vending machines. And so that's what you eat all night long, if you even have a chance to eat at all, which isn't often the case. And then the hospital cafeteria would open up at about 5:30 in the morning again, and I would get to leave by about 11 a.m. So right before I would leave the hospital, I would go and I'd always buy the same thing, a carton of chocolate milk and an egg sandwich. And that's what I had every single time. And then probably at least a third of the time on the drive home, I would take an alternate route to stop at a grocery store far away from the hospital, far away from where I lived, and buy my favorite foods to binge on, which was some form of chocolate cake, some form of bread with melty kind of cheese, a bag of chips, and Coke. Always the same thing,
Yep.
horrible things. And I would take them home. I would not even go in the elevator of my condo. I would take the stairs so no one could see me. And I would get home and binge on all of this until I fell asleep.
Oh, oh,
It was awful.
thank you for your
Yeah.
vulnerability, because I know there's so many people
Mm,
that are resonating with this right now.
mhm,
I mean, that was my life in a sales career, but similar
mm.
type of routine. But granted, you're as an ER doctor and as a doctor, like don't get me wrong, that's the most intense for sure. But I just so resonate with you. So thank you for sharing that, because I man, so here's what's interesting, and this is why I wanted to bring this up is the chaotic eating, and this is what I resonate with, is when you said, I literally woke up, had to be out the door by 5:30. So right off the bat, you had no food, no hydration, no nourishment, no time in nature, which was me. You went right into stress. You didn't even have a chance to like get your nervous system grounded. You went right into stress all day, no hydration. And if it was sugar or caffeine that, made you feel like this,
Mhm,
which is what I was doing with organic cold brew. And then I would get like a ton of keto snacks and just eat those all day, because I was trying to, I just wanted something to soothe the stress I was in. And I would always go in the side room and eat too. Me too. And then you're working all day with not only the doctors coming at you, but then you have the emotional stuff from the patient and the patient's family, right? So
mhm,
you're getting
mhm.
stress from every angle, and you're probably absorbing a lot of it, would you say? Like
Oh,
absorbing the
all of it. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And then added onto this is like, notice how little I actually ate and
Mhm.
in a 30-hour period. And so when you are physically starving on top of exhausted and stressed and overwhelmed with
Oh,
the habit of emotional eating and using food, like there was just no way that I was ever going to not binge in that situation.